Steven Spielberg, in fact, was the one who turned me onto that footage, and I went to Jim Lovell, and I said, Steven was telling me about this process, and he says, oh, you mean on the Vomit Comet? He said, it's brutal. It's brutal.
Hollywood knows Ron Howard has worked with the industry's biggest stars. He has directed legends, helped launch icons, and watched entire generations of actors rise and fall. But at 71, Howard did something no one expected. He admitted who truly intimidated him, who shocked him, and who quietly made him feel embarrassed. And once you understand why he admired those actors, you'll realize Ron Howard is far more complicated than we ever imagined. Number 1. Tom Hanks. The actor, Ron Howard. Trusted more than anyone. At number 1, without hesitation or hesitation disguised as diplomacy, Ron Howard places Tom Hanks, the one actor he trusted instinctively, relied on emotionally, and quietly built an entire phase of his career around. Their story began in 1984 with Splash, at a moment when Hanks was still widely dismissed as a lightweight comic presence. Studios saw jokes. Audiences saw charm. Ron Howard saw credibility. He sensed that Hanks had an unusual ability to make implausible ideas feel grounded in everyday human behavior, and that instinct would prove decisive. Howard later explained, Tom has this rare ability to make the unbelievable feel completely normal. The statement sounds simple, but it became a cornerstone of Howard's filmmaking philosophy. Hanks did not sell high-concept material. He normalized it. Whether playing a man in love with a mermaid, an astronaut stranded in space, or a professor entangled in global conspiracies, Hanks approached each role as a working human being rather than a spectacle. That quality became essential when Howard moved into large, technical narratives. Apollo 13 in 1995 was a turning point. Instead of playing heroism loudly, Hanks portrayed quiet competence under unbearable pressure. He followed procedures, worried privately, and trusted teamwork. The danger felt real because the performance refused melodrama, and the audience believed every second. As their collaborations continued, the trust deepened. Howard has said that after 5 films together, direction became almost unnecessary. A glance or a slight nod was enough to adjust an entire scene. That level of shorthand allowed Howard to take creative risks elsewhere, knowing the emotional core would never collapse. The consequence of this admiration reshaped Howard's career. He learned that the greatest leading men do not overpower stories. They stabilize them. And once Howard understood that truth, it defined the second half of his filmmaking life. Number 2. Russell Crowe. The performance in A Beautiful Mind that forced Ron Howard to confront his own limits. Sliding into second place on Ron Howard's personal ranking is Russell Crowe, the actor who unsettled him from the very first rehearsal and forced him to rethink what artistic fear actually means. When Crowe walked into A Beautiful Mind in 2001, Ron Howard felt genuine anxiety, and it had nothing to do with tabloid stories or Crowe's reputation. What Howard sensed immediately was intensity without compromise. Crowe was not there to explore possibilities. He was there with decisions already made. Crowe arrived prepared in a way Howard had rarely witnessed. He spent months studying schizophrenia, speaking with mathematicians who had worked alongside John Nash, and visiting psychiatric hospitals to understand how delusions coexist with brilliance. By the time filming began, Crowe wasn't building the character on set. He was defending it. Howard later explained, Russell doesn't push back out of ego. He pushes back because his instincts are already inside the character. That distinction changed everything. Crowe questioned scenes line by line, challenged emotional shortcuts, and rejected anything that felt explanatory rather than truthful. For Howard, this created friction, but also clarity. The portrayal of Nash's unraveling avoided spectacle entirely. The fear felt internal. Audiences were dropped into it. That process unsettled Howard because it removed his safety net. Crowe's approach demanded trust in discomfort and patience with ambiguity, yet the results were undeniable. Crowe's performance earned the Academy Award, and the film's emotional credibility became its defining strength. Crowe taught Howard that actors labeled difficult are often protecting something essential. After this collaboration, Howard stopped avoiding confrontation on set. He began listening for it. He learned that when an actor fights this hard, it usually means the truth is at stake. Number 3. Denzel Washington, the actor. Ron Howard learned from without ever directing. Third on Ron Howard's list comes Denzel Washington, an actor whose influence reached Howard without a single day of collaboration and left a lasting mark through observation alone. Ron Howard didn't need a collaboration to learn from Washington. Watching was enough. Over the years, Howard has spoken about Washington's presence in terms that go beyond performance. Howard once said, "He doesn't demand attention, it finds him." That observation stayed with him because it explained something Howard had sensed but never articulated. In films like Glory, 1989, and Malcolm X, 1992, Washington demonstrated a balance that deeply unsettled Howard. He could fill the screen with explosive conviction in one moment, then withdraw into quiet vulnerability in the next, without changing his physical intensity. The transitions felt inevitable, not performed. Howard noticed that Washington never telegraphed emotion. He allowed it to arrive when it was ready. What struck Howard most was Washington's certainty. He never rushed to explain his characters. He never overplayed emotional beats to guide the audience. He arrived prepared, grounded, and fully committed to the inner logic of the role. That preparation created authority. The lesson for Howard was subtle but transformative. True power on screen does not come from loudness or dominance. It comes from conviction. Washington taught him that some actors walk onto a set having already solved the emotional equation. In those moments, the director's role changes. After studying Washington's work, Howard began directing with more silence and fewer instructions. He trusted actors to carry weight without commentary. Washington showed him that when presence is genuine, explanation becomes unnecessary, and the audience feels the truth immediately. Number 4. Michael Keaton, the actor who taught Ron Howard to embrace chaos. Opening the 4th chapter of Ron Howard's list is Michael Keaton, the performer who arrived early in Howard's directing life and permanently altered how he understood control on a film set. Long before prestige dramas or awards entered the picture, Keaton collided with Ron Howard on Night Shift in 1982. Howard was still shaping his identity behind the camera, learning structure, pacing, and control. Keaton arrived operating on an entirely different wavelength. He didn't treat the script as a set of instructions. He treated it as a playground. Lines became suggestions. Physical movement became storytelling. Keaton improvised relentlessly, bending rhythm and injecting comedy into moments that could have collapsed under conventional delivery. Howard later said Keaton could take a simple scene and find 17 ways to make it interesting. That level of unpredictability terrified many young directors, especially those trained to protect continuity and precision. Howard felt the fear, too, and then chose to lean into it. What shocked Howard was that Keaton never lost the emotional center of a scene. The chaos was purposeful. Beneath the improvisation was instinct, and beneath the instinct was truth. Keaton showed him that structure could suffocate authenticity if held too tightly. Some of the most honest moments on camera happen when an actor steps beyond the map and discovers something unplanned. The consequence was liberating. Howard stopped over-directing. He began watching more closely instead of correcting. That shift changed how he evaluated performances. He learned to recognize when energy was alive rather than orderly. That lesson followed Howard far beyond comedy. It shaped his willingness to cast against type and trust actors with tonal risk. Keaton taught him that surprise is not a mistake to be fixed. When handled correctly, it becomes the reason audiences remember a scene long after it ends. Number 5. Anthony Hopkins, the actor who redefined mastery for Ron Howard. Closing. Ron Howard's list, yet leaving the deepest impression, is Anthony Hopkins, the actor Howard speaks about with a quiet reverence usually reserved for once-in-a-lifetime encounters. If there is one performer who fundamentally reshaped how Howard understands mastery, it is Hopkins. Their connection grew from observation. Howard studied Hopkins from afar, frame by frame, scene by scene, absorbing a level of control that felt almost unsettling. Hopkins taught him that greatness often looks effortless, precisely because it is built on terrifying discipline. Hopkins is known for memorizing his lines hundreds of times, repeating them until dialogue stops feeling recited and starts feeling like thought. By the time cameras roll, he is no longer acting words. He is reacting to them. That method stunned Howard because it created spontaneity inside absolute control, a paradox most actors never reach. Howard once explained, "Most actors push emotions outward. Tony pulls you so close, you can't escape." That precision changed how Howard understood restraint. Hopkins didn't rely on grand gestures. He used stillness, the slightest movement of the eyes. Those choices carried emotional weight that overwhelmed louder performances. Later, Howard began trusting quiet moments more than spectacle. He allowed scenes to breathe without explanation. He learned that audiences lean in when nothing is forced. Hopkins ultimately showed Howard the highest goal of acting, to erase the sense of performance entirely. When Hopkins works, the craft disappears, and only human behavior remains. For Howard, that realization was sobering and exhilarating. It reframed his ambition as a director. Ron Howard didn't admire these actors because they were famous. He admired them because they scared him, challenged him, and forced him to grow. Which one shocked you the most? And which actor do you think changed him the deepest? Comment below. Your answer might not be as obvious as you think. Subscribe for more untold stories behind Hollywood's greatest collaborations.